Respected Chief Guest, Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Bangladesh, distinguished guest speakers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. My name is Sharmin Chowdhury, and I'm very glad to have this privilege to welcome you all in today's seminar on a very important issue, that is Rohingya crisis and repatriation, what is to be done. At the very outset, I would like to request Dr. Muhammad Farooq, Advisor Diplomat Publications, for his address of welcome. Dr. Muhammad Farooq.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar on Rohingya crisis and repatriation. What is to be done? First of all, I would like to remember the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, under whose leadership we have gained independence, and the 3 million martyrs who has given their life in 1971 in the liberation war of Bangladesh. Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, MP, Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Minister Abul Hassan Chowdhury, respected keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Delwar Hussain, respected keynote speaker, Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, foreign dignitaries, respected guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. I want to welcome and thanks you all for being here with us today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been with us for a long time, now as well as those who are newly joined with this valuable event. We are presently here already know that the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing refugee crises in the world. And yet, not everyone is aware of what exactly is happening to the Rohingya people. The recent influx of Rohingya refugees fleeing escalating violence in the Rakhine state since August 2017 has more than doubled the total refugee population in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is hosting over 1.1 million Rohingya in Cox's Bazar, Bhasanchar, Bangladesh. Bangladesh is stressed beyond its capacity. Due to Rohingya influx, deforestation occurred that caused flash flood, land erosion, and regular fire incident in the camp areas. In fact, we have lost around 70% protected vegetation after 2017. Moreover, mistrust and grievances of local community over Rohingya are increasing day by day. The sooner of Rohingya are repatriated, the better both the Bangladesh and Myanmar. There are windows of opportunities for the international community to put pressure on Myanmar authorities to resolve the Rohingya crisis. And there is no other option but repatriation to resolve the crisis. Safe repatriation and end gender-based violence is most important to solve this Rohingya issue in Bangladesh. Our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina MP, Mother of the Humanity, speaking at the ceremonial opening of the Paris Peace Forum said, quote, "The world must act seriously to make sure these people are back to Myanmar soon. Otherwise, the security risks from the crisis will not just remain confined within our border. We already see sign of that," unquote, end quote. Today, our keynote speaker and chief guest and other guests will discuss the concern of emergency and what steps should be taken into account on resettlement Thank you everyone once again for joining this seminar today. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, long live Bangladesh.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad Farooq. Thank you very much. So as Dr. Mohammad Farooq was mentioning that we have two keynote speakers in our today's seminar. And at first, I would like to request Professor Dr. Delwar Hossain, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, to please present his paper.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Honorable Chief Guest, Foreign Minister of People's Republic of Bangladesh, Honorable Moderator, distinguished fellow speakers, respected guests and participants, excellencies, friends from different embassies and foreign missions, and media, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum and very good morning. My presentation is not, title in the invitation letter, but you can see from here, actually I am going to focus on the domestic aspect of Myanmar, because this is the crux of the problem that I think we need to focus, because this has remained a little bit unnoticed and underrepresented. And if you just follow the statement, the country became independent, that is Myanmar, in 1948, but still observers or analysts almost universally recognize that this country has neither known peace nor national unity and democracy. So it is a very different kind of country, and this country has developed a kind of domestic structure which is the core of understanding the cause and solutions to the Rohingya crisis. And that is the primary or kind of proposition that I have in my presentation. We know, this country has a long history, and I'm not going to deal with all aspects of history. The country became independent in 1948, but before that, in 1947, it signed a union treaty with different groups of communities. But at the same year, the country, Myanmar, got into civil war, into insurgency war. So, but still it continued some kind of representative democracy. And then we know what happened in 1962. Myanmar witnessed the military coup, and the military rule continued for long. And then in 1982, we know they introduced citizenship law, basically to exclude the Rohingyas to the rights to citizenship. And then we know about 1988, when there was an election, and that was denied by the military junta during that time. And Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the leader of NLD, National League for Democracy, she was arrested. And then the country suffered from sanctions and different domestic upheaval, unrest, but it continued with its rule of dictatorship. And also we know in 2011, the country partially opened, and the so-called hybrid kind of democracy started. But then that era also ended in 2021 February with a new coup in Myanmar, and that was actually unexpected and surprising, because the leader who was arrested by the regime was freed in 2010, and Myanmar was a bit in country where we saw that US President Barack Obama and many Western leaders and regional leaders visited, and Myanmar was enjoying kind of cooperation. And Aung San Suu Kyi who also supported the Myanmar regime, and also particularly we know about what she did in ICC, International Crime Tribunal, where she supported the genocide of the military junta. But that changed, and so I think, well, the 2020 elections, where actually NLD won in a big way, was the turning point. Now Myanmar is a new political landscape. But since we have very limited time, so I'll try to cover some of the highlights of internal and external dynamics of Myanmar. But if we want to understand what kind of state Myanmar is, of course, I mean, every state in the post-colonial era is struggling with the issue of state building and nation building. But Myanmar, we see that they could not resolve this issue, and still they are actually fighting to how to deal with the ethnic or ethnicity and nationalism. And this country is still in a transition from feudalism to modernism, and now we see globalization. So it is still at the very early stage of state building, and it has failed to create some basic political institutions to deal with domestic problems. Particularly, if we see the structure of the state, Myanmar, where actually many analysts argue that there is a nexus between state, insurgency, and drug. So it's a very exceptional country, and the country has also certain features. For example, I mean, it has 40% of territories which are known as frontier areas, which are basically areas where different tribal communities or different ethnic communities they live, and they have more than 32% minority population. It's one of the very few countries in the world where actually there is a real problem of political integration and political national political unity. And counterinsurgency, it is I mean, evidenced by many that Myanmar regime has spent more than 40% of government spending in counterterrorism or counterinsurgency work. And it has developed a thriving cross-border black market, drug, and the actors that we see in Myanmar, of course, Myanmar regime always remains an actor where the Tatmadaw, the Myanmar military is the all-powerful political institution. Buddhism is very, very important, and they have several insurgent groups, more than 100, political parties and national unity government, which was recently formed in the post-co period. But they have, the Myanmar state has fundamental issues like how they perceive power. I mean, they perceive power as a zero-sum game in the country, and they are also willing to and trying to see themselves as the regional powerhouse. So Myanmar has problems with their political integration, national unity. At the same time, they want to see as a regional power. So there is a contradiction, and we know how Tatmadaw pursued different military doctrines in the phase of 1950s when they focused more on foreign interference. But in the second phase, they focused on containing and eliminating insurgency and dealing with different ethnic groups who are fighting for their rights and their survival. And also in the phase 3, which came after 1988, after the election, and they actually declared 3 causes for their political structure or political kind of activity. Number 1 is the non-disintegration of national solidarity, the perpetuation of national sovereignty, and non-disintegration of the union. And we know about Buddhism as a religion which has become a kind of source of legitimacy in Myanmar for long, even today. And they have Sangha as a monkhood, as a strong institution who are actually very much aligned with the state. And you can see they still follow the slogans like Burma for the Burmans. To be Burman is to be Buddhist. And there are political parties which are related to the regimes, including NLD, which was kind of part of the government for some 10 years. But what is very disturbing that the Myanmar from the beginning has unleashed the brutal politics of sovereignty. In the name of sovereignty or national unity, what they wanted to do is they were trying to build a Burma Buddhist nation based on nationalism and ultra-nationalism, where they actually pinpointed to protect race and religion in the country. And for that, they were ready to, or they are ready to do whatever they wanted. So they actually introduced the politics of discrimination and marginalization and the process of othering in Myanmar. And we know about very diversity in terms of ethnic groups. You can see from the map how different ethnic communities are located in Myanmar, particularly having the then we have seen, and Myanmar is also going through insurgency and counterinsurgency wars, and there are 4 phases of this war, and stage or phase 1948 to 1962, and then stage 2 since 1962, when Myanmar had a military coup for the first time. Then stage 3 in 2015, and stage 4 currently what is happening in Myanmar. But this is very important. How actually Myanmar fought with different groups of people, not to mention about the Rohingyas, and what instruments they used and they are using. And this is particularly based on the fact-finding mission, which was actually constituted by UN Human Rights Council. And I have taken most of the evidence from their report, where actually we have seen that Myanmar has been focusing on certain instruments, certain ways which are actually contributing to torture, suppression, and repression of different groups of people, particularly different communities. So they target the civilians. They have the so-called 4 cards policy, under which they cut different non-state groups, particularly community groups, from access to food, finances, intelligence, and recruits from the local civilian population. There is widespread sexual violence. They have introduced, and they are continuing it with it, the exclusionary rhetoric, which is based on actually ultranationalism. They have also allowed impunity to all perpetrators, and all the perpetrators enjoy a complete kind of impunity, and so far there has not been any accountability of those perpetrators. And also we know from UN sources and also ICC, they are also committing genocide, crimes against humanity, and also war crimes. And here we see who are behind the genocide. And about the Rohingyas, this is very disturbing. We know, currently 1.1 million Rohingyas are living in Bangladesh, and they have a long history. But if we take the history of 1978, when they started the so-called Operation Dragon, King Dragon, and now they are actually in Operation Clearance. So through this process, Rohingyas have been displaced forcibly, and they took shelter in Bangladesh and other countries. And how actually Rohingyas, like other communities, have been the subject to the process of denying citizenship. They have been subject to introducing a national registration card. Myanmar regime has created model villages on the lands confiscated from Rohingya in the northern part of the Rakhine state. They face travel restrictions, particularly since 2001. They have to face marriage permit. They have no right to employment automatically, since they are not citizens. They are also prohibited to certain categories of employment, like teaching in public school, public universities, and becoming doctors. And also, we know, they are subject to national verification cards. And in the last elections, 2020, they were also not allowed to vote. And they suffer from narratives in Myanmar, which has been created by both the regime and also the Buddhist extremists. If you see some of the slogans or some of the signboards in Myanmar, which are very common, Muslims are not allowed to stay overnight. Muslims are not allowed to buy or rent properties. No one is allowed to marry Muslims. If you try to feed the tiger, it will eat you. And if you give any space to color, who are known to the Myanmar Buddhist, Rohingyas as color, space to color, your country, race, and religion will be eliminated. So these are some of the examples of part of the narratives, xenophobic narratives that Myanmar regime has created, and they are actually still focusing this kind of things. And also to other major communities, the Shan, the Kachin, the Chin, the Karen, the Mon and Karenni, they are doing almost same thing. One of the statements from this fact-finding mission, the Tatmadaw soldiers do not treat us like humans. They treat us like animals. They look at us as though we shouldn't even exist. So almost similar types of instruments they have been using for decades, regardless of democracy or non-democracy. And in the case of external dynamics, I just want to draw your attention to Myanmar has borders with two major countries, China and India, and also Bangladesh and Thailand. So this is something which is very important for Myanmar. And Myanmar is now getting strength from their border relations with, particularly with India, China, and Thailand. And also to contextualize Myanmar's interrelations, we know Myanmar has very strong bilateral relations with some of the countries and also regional and global. I'm just rushing because of time. So there is a growing engagement of great powers in Myanmar, which is very clear, and we all know about that. And what is their interest? What we have seen that in the case of Myanmar, for the external powers, particularly for the great powers, it is resources and geopolitics that actually surpass the norms and humanitarian appeal. As we see, Myanmar is actually a country of 1948 South Africa. You know, say white and non-white in South Africa segregated through the policy of apartheid. And Myanmar is precisely doing the same thing in this country since 1948. It's the South Africa of Southeast Asia. But this country has never faced such kind of scenario. Such kind of treatment that South Africa faced. And we see how geopolitical interest of different powers like China, India, or Japan. And so, I think, let me conclude rather. So what I think Myanmar has been focusing on maximizing their power and self-reliance. They are enjoying geopolitical and geoeconomic advantages and pursuing the strategy also of non-alliance because it suits their purpose. And they have been continuing the use of violence and nationalism against minority communities. Finally, what I think, given the domestic scenarios that we see even today and yesterday, and also there is no sign to end in future, So we need more support to the current national unity government and proactive role of regional powers in support of democracy, repatriation of the Rohingyas. And there is a key role of ASEAN. And what I emphasize, we should go beyond UN General Assembly resolutions. In 1962, the UN General Assembly resolution took, UN General Assembly took a resolution against South Africa by including the provision of imposing sanctions on South Africa. But here we see UN General Assembly is passing resolutions where actually we don't see this kind of provision. And also Security Council was also very active in the case of South Africa. So I think the UN should go beyond its General Assembly mandate, and UN Security Council should come forward. And I also finally want to see more consistent and effective role of the great powers to deal with, to me actually it is a civilizational crisis. It is not just crisis of the Rohingyas or some communities. It is a crisis of the civilization, and that has to be dealt from that way. And the internal and external dynamics of Myanmar clearly show that we have to focus on Myanmar's state, and that may help us to rethink our policies as a part of the global community. Thank you very much.